Good morning, everyone, and welcome to my YouTube channel, J.E.M.E.D. This morning we will be gemmed up under the theme Wisdom from the Elder to the Chosen. And we would be looking at Exodus chapter 18. And it reads, Now Jethro, the priest of Midian and father-in-law of Moses, heard of everything God had done for Moses and for his people Israel, and how the Lord had brought Israel out of Egypt. After Moses had sent away his wife, Zipporah, his father-in-law, Jethro, received her and her two sons. One son was named Gershom, for Moses said, I have become a foreigner in a foreign land. And the other was named Eliezer, for he said, My father's God was my helper. He saved me from the sword of Pharaoh. Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, together with Moses' sons and wife, came to him in the wilderness, where he was camped near the mountain of God. Jethro had sent word to him, I, your father-in-law, Jethro, am coming to you with your wife and two sons. So Moses went out to meet his father-in-law and bowed down and kissed him. They greeted each other and then went into the tent. Moses told his father-in-law about everything the Lord had done to Pharaoh and the Egyptians for Israel's sake, and about all the hardship they had met along the way, and how the Lord had saved them. Jethro was delighted to hear about all the good things the Lord had done for Israel in rescuing them from the hands of the Egyptians. He said, Praise be to the Lord who rescued you from the hand of the Egyptians and of Pharaoh, and who rescued the people from the hand of the Egyptians. Now I know that the Lord is greater than all other gods, for he did this to those who had treated Israel arrogantly. Then Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, brought a burnt offering and other sacrifices to God. And Aaron came with all the elders of Israel to eat a meal with Moses' father-in-law in the presence of God. So I'm going to pause here for a little minute, and it's mainly because I want us to zero in a little bit on the fact that Jethro was impressed and moved by how the Lord worked and used Moses. So we see that it is when he heard what happened that he came to the wilderness to meet Moses, right? So let's just look one thing up before we continue with the devotion. Okay. Okay, so when he heard of everything God did for Moses and the people of Israel, then he decided to go to Moses. And some of the times when we go through different things in our lives, the people who seem to be disconnected or on the outside are the ones to come to us when they hear of the goodness of the Lord. So it's important to not prematurely include them. So it's when the victory was won, then they came. And it's kind of reminding me of a conversation I had yesterday where I believe it may have been prematurely. And I now need to shut an unexpected door. So we see here that Jethro, he brought the wife, he brought the kids. So it kind of felt like there was a level of celebration to some degree because we see later that Moses and the elders came to eat with Jethro. But what I liked is that, irrespective of Moses being able to attain such victories, he maintained a position of humility, understanding that um, Jethro is his father-in-law, and giving him same reverence as if he was his actual father. So then he bowed, right? So while everybody viewed Moses as the representation of God, and they were the ones to likely, in essence, bow to his commands, Moses, in turn, was humble enough to also bow to Jethro. So we see this part happening there. Um, and then he, moving to a place of more comfort and privacy, he went into the tent to have that one on one bonding time with his father in law. Right? There is no mention of him having the time with his wife and kids, but there is a level of reference being mentioned concerning the time he spent with his father in law. So we see here part one speaks to how moved Jethro was by what happened with and through Moses, right? So, with that being said, and understanding that it was his reason for coming over, leaving Midian to come to the wilderness and bringing the wife, that's his daughter, Moses' wife, which is Jethro's daughter, and Moses' two sons to meet Moses because they heard the great and miraculous news, right? That the next thing is they sat and then they spoke and they shared what was going on in each of their lives, in essence, giving updates. So let's continue. From verse 13. The next day Moses took his seat to serve as judge for the people, and they stood around him from morning till evening. When his father in law saw all that Moses was doing for the people, he said, "What is this you are doing for the people? Why do you alone sit as judge, while all these people stand around you from morning till evening?" Moses answered him, "Because the people come to me to seek God's will. Whenever they have a dispute, it is brought to me, and I decide between the parties and inform them of God's decrees and instructions." So we see here that there was a level of dependency on Moses. And a lot of the times it can become burdensome when there is such strong dependency on one individual, right? But it ought not to be so, right? Because the individual themselves is not God. So it's a situation where we have to be aware of who the ultimate source is. And not only that, but for us to understand that the direction should not just be directly to us. Then at the end of the day, there isn't fruits in terms of replication and for the continuity of something to be accomplished. And not only that, for the effectiveness of something as well, because there are literally 24 hours in a day, and it's only so much that one can do. So that needs to be taken into account. Let's continue with verse 17. Moses' father in law replied, "What you are doing is not good." So I would pause here because after such praise, right? After such expression of thanks and adoration of what the Lord had done and how he used Moses and how Moses has been a faithful servant, then we see by the following day Moses' faults, Moses' error, Moses' incorrect method of doing things came into play. And when this happened, we see that it came from the same person who gave so much praise that he traveled from Midian to the wilderness. So sometimes, yes, one may get caught up, just being so thankful for how the Father worked in someone else's life, being thankful about the testimony, about the miraculous hand of the Father upon someone else's life. And it's to the point where there could be some form of idolization if you're also unable to rebuke something that that person is doing that is wrong. So thankfully, we see here that Jethro did not fall into that category. While he would give the praise and the reverence based on what the father did, he was also willing to share in something he saw that was not right. So let's continue from verse 18. You see, these people who come to you will only wear yourselves out. The work is too heavy for you. You cannot handle it alone. So we see here that Jethro was able to see something that either Moses did not see or would not articulate. And there are times where in our lives we are so caught up and we believe that it is just us that is able to do something. And if we don't do it, then it would not be done. And that's not the case at all. We see here that Moses was incorrect, and Jethro told him, "You are wrong. You will wear yourself out. You cannot handle it alone, right? You're still human in nature. The hand of God is upon your life, yes, but there is a level of wisdom that you're lacking. So what you are doing is wrong. It is not right. It works against the vessel of God, which is your body, right? So then we see in verse 19 that Jethro is saying, "Listen now to me, and I will give you some advice, and may God be with you. You must be the people's representative before God and bring their disputes to Him." Verse 20, "Teach them His decrees and instructions, and show them the way they are to live and how they are to behave. But select capable men from all the people, men who fear God, trustworthy men who hate dishonest gain, and appoint them as officials over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens." So we see here that strategy is being given, right? So, as much as Moses is directly, right, in conversation with the Lord, in direct relation with the Lord, something he was doing was outside of the wisdom of the Lord. And it took an outside advice, it took outside counsel, not even individuals who were part of the move from Egypt to um, to the wilderness, out of Egypt, the freedom from Egypt, right? Somebody who was not part of it came and they were able to see where there was a need. So I think it is important for us to be able to be aware of the importance of a multitude of counsel, even though someone may not be directly there to feel and go through what it is, right? It is important for us to be able to appreciate where counsel comes from, right? So I do want to just share in this verse, Proverbs chapter 15, verse 28, as much as it is a different verse, I think it is also important. So the verse does say, let's pull it up. I like King James. Let's see if I can get this version. Okay, so I'm not getting the King James version. So it says, without counsel, plan fail, but with many advisors, they succeed. So we know that Moses did have an assistant who, right? So that was the main assistant. And he also had Aaron, who was his right hand, who assisted him. And we see here that counsel is needed because there are certain things that Moses apparently was blinded by. So he just figured that I'm doing the work of the Lord, but not realizing that even with it, there was a level of lacking with wisdom and that he would have been worn out. So we need to take that into account. Let us continue. And we see that the counsel was to, in essence, teach the decrees and the instructions to individuals who were capable men. They feared the Lord first and foremost. So they had that revel. The heart was in the right position, and they were also trustworthy men. So the heart was in the right position, and the actions proved them trustworthy, right? So they met the qualifications necessary. So all they now needed was instruction and information so that they can go about doing it how they should. And then we see here that Jethro is advising that they be officials appointed over thousands, over hundreds, over fifties, and over tens of people. And this reminds me of the verse that speaks of measure of faith given to each individual. So there are different measures of faith. So we understand that there is a different measure of capability that individuals have. So while one individual may be able to manage or be an official over thousands of people, another individual may just be able to do it over a couple tens, like maybe 20, 30 individuals. So it doesn't mean that that person is not worthy or that person is not going to be effective. It's just that the way the person is wired and because of the giftings the person have, the person is most effective with that number. Right? So it's also important to put that in place. Then we see here, have them serve as judges for the people at all times, but have them bring very difficult cases to you. So then we see hierarchy and a system is being put in place so that the workload, the responsibilities being shared between capable individuals. And not only is that happening, but when it is at a point where the workload is too much, then it is brought to Moses. So then he's dealing with less. So with that being said, because he's first and foremost, he's also the one in direct communication with God. So since he's teaching the others, only what he has taught them they would know. So everything else that they don't know, then they come to him, which makes perfect sense and would make the flow of everything move smoothly. So we see that being done, and when that is done, right? Then the pressure is removed of Moses. The pressure is removed of the Israelites who need to wait from morning until evening, right, to receive that counsel from Moses. So then persons have more time to do the things that they want to do. And it's not much of a burdensome task on anyone. So let's continue. Verse 23. Jethro says, if you do this and God so commands, you will be able to stand the strain, and all these people will go home satisfied. Right? So then everybody would be, which means that there were individuals who went home that were unsatisfied prior. So now we put a better strategy in place to fulfill the needs as well. So verse 24 says, Moses listened to his father-in-law and did everything he said. He chose capable men from all Israel and made them leaders of the people, officials over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. They served as judges for all the people at all times. The difficult cases they brought to Moses, but the simple ones they decided themselves. Then they were given that level of authority. Then Moses sent his father-in-law on his way, and Jethro returned to his own country. So, counsel is important, irrespective of being chosen, irrespective of direct communication with our Heavenly Father. It is also important to embrace the counsel of who God have placed in our lives and who God sends to our lives. Because at the end of the day, it is that counsel that would assist us in going to the next level or not being too overwhelmed to even make it or continue on the level that we're at. Right? So I would like to thank you for being gemmed up, J Empowerment Early Morning Empowering Devotion. Thank you for being gemmed up with me, Janelle. And I wish you a counsel full indeed in the Lord.